Good morning and welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show. This is the show that celebrates the men and women who are working so hard, not just in coastal Mississippi, but really across the great state of Mississippi to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, I've had a string of really good shows. I think that every day is a good show. We put a lot of time into inviting guests that are going to bring some perspective, something we can all learn from, and I'm just thrilled to be here to be able to bring them to you. Like, for example, Woody Bailey was on recently, gave us the latest at Cruising the Coast. Once again, Cruising the Coast was identified as the top car show in America by USA Today. What an incredible accomplishment that is, year after year. What a special show that is, and what it does for coastal Mississippi is incredible. So if you missed that conversation, you can go to your favorite podcast or go to YouTube or Facebook and take a look at it. You'll be glad you did. What Woody's doing, what he's done over so many years is so important to coastal Mississippi. I had a great conversation with Brian Lamar. He used to work with the Naval Construction Battalion Center. Of course, you know it as the CB base. And he lives in Japan now. He'll be back, but he brought his family to Japan. He's a public information officer over there now. And he's writing a column now for SuperTalk Mississippi News. His first one was about some experiences of being in Japan and sort of correlating that to his time here in Mississippi. He'll be writing a lot about that, a lot of perspective, sort of, someone who lived in Mississippi for a long time, now lives in Japan. What are these compare and contrasts? It ought to be interesting reading, ought to be interesting conversations when he joins us on the show to talk about it. I had a great conversation with Oliver Diaz. Oliver, he's an old friend. He's, grew up in coastal Mississippi. He travels the world. He's former Supreme Court justice, really smart guy, reads a lot, and he's also writing a column for SuperTalk Mississippi News. And I just enjoyed that conversation. If you missed the conversation with Oliver, I really encourage you to go take a look at it, because what he's done, man, he and his wife they've traveled the world, and he has such a calm, collected point of view about things and such an interesting perspective because of his experience in other places. It's going to be interesting to see what he has to say going forward. I want to thank you for engaging with the show on social media, on podcasts, for listening on 103.1 or on SuperTalk TV at C-Spire TV. But the amount of engagement in the show continues to grow, and I really appreciate it. People want to know what's happening from coastal Mississippi. I was talking to a friend of mine actually the other day. I was doing a podcast with Ronnie Cuz Strickland, who is someone I've gotten to know really well through my outdoor show. And Ronnie has a podcast called A Fistful of Dirt. Now, Ronnie works for Mathews. For people in the outdoor community know that this is a internationally known brand, and his podcast has been downloaded a few million times. So it's a pretty big podcast. And we were talking about how interesting it is to be able to have access to social media data. We get so much data back. There's a lot of good about social media. You've heard me talk about it. There's a lot not so good about it as well, but you get a lot of information, and we have listeners to this show from all over the world. It's interesting. My speculation is that people who used to live in coastal Mississippi that may be stationed somewhere else or maybe work somewhere else now, but from Africa and Europe and Australia, it's just interesting to be able to get data like that. But the numbers for coastal Mississippi continue to rise, and I really appreciate it. I look back at my time after Hurricane Katrina, because I talk a lot about, pre-Katrina world and post-Katrina. People my age who were here in leadership roles after Hurricane Katrina, we tend to think in terms of pre-Katrina and post-Katrina. I say that a lot. But I remember back at my time after Katrina, and I remember one of the relationships that I really enjoyed developing was with my next guest. And before we get to Kevin Coggin, who's the executive director for the Coast Transit Authority, I wanted to share with you some things I learned along the way. Took a few notes and did some things to remind me. But what Kevin helped me understand is the role that public transportation plays in coastal Mississippi. Actually, he actually helped me learn the role that public transportation plays in a community anywhere in America. I was surprised to learn, in fact, when he and I were planning to do this show together, that he had been in the industry for 46 years, and he had become the executive director just 2 years before Katrina hit coastal Mississippi. But we tend to think of public transportation in terms of the poor, and certainly it is important. They have a very important role to play to give people access to employment and recreation and sort of these essential life-shaping opportunities. That is really important. But man, there's a huge economic development role that they play. Public transportation is key to, they in some cases actually determine where developmental patterns are going to be and where job opportunities might be, and literally play a role in economic development in coastal Mississippi. And then there's a regulatory side to this that has to do with carbon emissions and air quality and energy use and all this. It's a complicated world, in fact, that our friend Kevin Coggin works in these years. And I've been working for a month or two to try to get him to try to find a time where he and I could get together. And today's the day. And I am so thrilled to welcome Kevin Coggin to the Ricky Mathews Show. And first of all, let me just say good morning to you, my friend. How are you?
I'm great. Great. Good to be here. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. So it's amazing, man, that Katrina was so far. Listen, 18 years. It's hard to even say that, but time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it, my friend?
Yes, it does.
So look, we're gonna cover the waterfront, and I don't want to. We're going to come back into some of the details that apply to what I just said just a few minutes ago, but just in a nutshell, if you were telling someone in an elevator ride what Coast Transit Authority is, what do you say to them?
We're a regional public transit system, and what I usually tell people, we operate as a public utility, a commission. Think in terms of the port, the airport, the Coliseum. So we're an independent. Typically, urban transportation systems are owned and operated by a city, a county, a state. For instance, Hattiesburg and Jackson are owned and operated by the cities they serve, and they have this geographic restriction. And we're actually doing work outside of the state of Mississippi with our van pool. For instance, van pooling work commute is one of the many things we do. And we're operating van pools in the panhandle of Florida, lower counties of Alabama, Mississippi, and eastern lower counties of Louisiana, bringing people to work in Mississippi every day. So we do many, many things that people don't know we do. A lot of work in demand response, people with disabilities, seniors, getting heavy now into access to health care, mental health and physical health, and economic development. And people don't realize, you mentioned that. I know we'll talk a little bit more detail, but people do not really know the impact that we have on and the support we do to the local economy.
It's as you point out, sort of this independent organization. You have a board of commissioners. We'll go into some of who those members are here in just a second, but it has a multifaceted role, as you pointed out, and it has multiple revenue streams that are coming in. So in some respects, it's governmental money that's coming in. In other respects, it's money that you guys generate from the fees and from advertising and other things like that. But it's very diversified, both in terms of what you do, and it's very diversified in terms of the revenue stream that comes into your organization. Let's take a step back for a second, because there's some things I don't know about you, Kevin. Where did you grow up?
I am a native Biloxi, and I have lived here all my life. I live in St. Martin with my wife. We moved out of Biloxi when we bought our first house, and there were some issues with Biloxi at the time, with the economy, recession. The economic situation was not good. It's pre-casinos. And so we decided to, make our life in St. Martin, but we've lived here all of our life. My son, my daughter lives here. I'm blessed. I've got 6 grandchildren. So this is my home. I love my job. I serve the community that I live in and love so much, and the people are great. And you've talked about that. You've had many of them on your show. I know most of them personally. And I started my career as a diesel mechanic at Kennedy Engine Company, and Went to work for another place in Gulfport doing bus repair, and wound up at Coast Transit Authority. Worked my way up basically from a shop foreman, and some kind of how I wound up occupying this office. And
that's interesting.
It's fun.
Actually, let's do this. I didn't realize we're coming to the end of this segment, but when we come back on the other side, this notion of being a diesel mechanic, I actually have a very good friend who was also a diesel mechanic, and he now leads a major organization. But I'm going to make a point about what it means to be a diesel mechanic, actually how it helps you solve problems and understand how the world connects when we come back on the other side with Kevin Coggin from Coast Transit Authority. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. By the way, before we go any further with my guest, Kevin Coggin, I just want to say thank you to my friend Kyle Curley, the producer of this show. He's actually in the studio today. He normally would be doing this from his home. He's set up. He's got all the technology at his home to be able to do it, but he had some Wi-Fi this morning and had to make the decision to come in. But I never have to wonder about whether Kyle's going to be there. You can literally set your clock by Kyle when I do this show. And again, we've had over 800 conversations together. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, my friend. That is for sure. Okay, so back to Kevin. Kevin, when we went to break, though, you were mentioning that you started out as a diesel mechanic, and I said that I had a friend of mine that started out as a diesel mechanic. Then he became sort of a shop foreman, and these are diesel engines he ended up getting into that run very large ocean-going, vessels. And then he ended up running the company. But the way his mind worked, his work as a diesel mechanic just revealed a lot about his ability to solve problems and build things and understand complexity and whatever. I bet you draw on that all the time as a leader.
It really is, and I reflect back on it, and I talk about people and how does that stage you to do more things being a mechanic. I started out as a apprentice mechanic at Kennedy Engine Company in 1977. Worked my way up, went to all the schools and worked with senior mechanics in the field, and then wound up being a field mechanic. And when you're out there by yourself, you have to get it done. And we mostly worked on oil field boats. At the time, it was the oil field boom, and I was in South Louisiana most of the time. It's very analytical. It's not computerized troubleshooting like it is now. You literally needed to know what every piece and part that diesel engine does and how it interacts with other parts. I kind of equate it to a doctor. You've got all these things you can't see, and you have to know all the. But anyway, it's precision measurements. It's very analytical. It's plumbing. It's electrical. It's the gamut, and you learn mental analytical skills. And that's what has really been the base for what I'm doing now. I'm a very analytical person. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with troubleshooting. I am not good with memory. I can't remember anything, but that's okay. I think the analytical, it's certainly in my job, the analytical is much more important than the memory part. So it has been the base of where I'm at today.
You make me thinking of Kennedy Engine Company. I need to circle back and tell that story, because it wasn't just the oil field, but it was shrimp boats and all these commercial boats that operate out of coastal Mississippi. Kennedy Engine Company, it's been kind of out of sight, out of mind for people, but they played a historical role in coastal Mississippi, haven't they? Yeah,
they were huge. And of course, for people may not know, they were a Detroit diesel engine distributor. They're like a wholesale engine company, and they were regional. That all these engine companies had their territory. And we did a lot of work in South Louisiana because they sold engines and probably a little cheaper than some companies in Louisiana. So that's how we got going down there. And they were huge. When I worked there, they were as big as they've ever been. We had a ton of mechanics, and there were they had some of the best mechanics. I'm not referencing me, but I learned from these people. They literally had some of the best mechanics in the country working right there at Kennedy Engine. There's no doubt.
When you found your way in the ground transportation arena, did you have an immediate good fit? Did you have any idea that you would spend 46 plus years of your career in that industry?
You never know, what life brings. So I left Kennedy Engine. I worked there 3.5 years, and it was road work. It was hard work. I ruptured a disc in my back. I mean, it's just that hard of physical work. And I saw early on, I didn't see older people doing that kind of work. It's too physically hard. So I left, and I wanted to get into management, and so I went to work for Hausman Bus Sales in Gulfport, and we did Greyhound buses and renovated them and whatnot. And so I went from I was hired to do engine work there, and then I went, because of my analytical skills and my abilities that I learned at Kennedy Engine, I wound up running the whole shop, repairing everything on a bus from bumper to bumper. And then they got bought out, and I came to Coast Transit Authority and saw that as an opportunity. And that has worked out for me tremendously. And of course, I've had mentors like all of us have. I've had 3 or 4 professional mentors in my life, and Ted Hearn was one of them here at Coast Transit Authority that got me into literally the business end of it, the dollars and cents, the budgeting and that kind of stuff. I was, running maintenance and doing contracts and but Ted was one of the mentors that got me into the mathematics part of it, the dollars and cents.
It's interesting when you look at your mission statement of CTA. It's kind of, I'll just read it. It's kind of simple, but it's a complex thing that you have to do to deliver. It says to provide safe, dependable, clean, comfortable, convenient, and affordable public transportation services to the Mississippi Gulf Coast in a cost-efficient manner. I mean, it's a good mission statement, but boy, does it break down in a complicated way. It's a much more dynamic thing today than it was back when you started, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the world has totally changed in many aspects. Our community has changed. Gaming changed everything for the good economically, and my personal opinion is that gaming lifted the Gulf Coast and the state of Mississippi out of, at the time, economic peril, and it's been good. Been good to us. It's generated a lot of ridership, a lot of revenue. We carry a ton of casino workers, and we carry a lot of casino patrons on our casino hopper. So it's been really good for us, for Coast Transit Authority, and in my opinion, it's been great for our community.
So it's 3 coast counties, but let's get specific about let's talk. When people think of bus service, they think about fixed routes. A bus they can depend will be in that place at that moment and I can get to the next place, and I can do that on a regular basis. So let's talk about the fixed route part of what you do, but then we'll sort of break down all these other diversified areas that you're involved in as well.
Fixed route is what you see in any city, and I talk about this all the time when I make presentations. And that's what people recognize. Any city has got a fixed route service. The wheels on the bus go round and round. It's on a time schedule, and you know what it is, and it's coming and where you can go. Yeah, I call it the backbone. It's what we've done historically. The only new route, fixed route that we're running now, in addition to what we were running when I was appointed executive director, is D'Iberville. And that's, we've been running that a very long time. And so that's one of the many things we do. There's a lot of more modern ways to deliver service, and we can talk more in depth about that if you want to, but it's basically called microtransit. And it serves a larger geographic area, but the fixed route service we're running right now is the backbone, and I don't see us short term adding fixed route services. We've tried to do that. We tried to do a Pops Ferry route, a new route in Biloxi, and we had the most interest from any new route we've ever run, but there was not enough people riding it to justify continuing it. And so fixed route bus service is the most expensive service you can provide.
Yeah, and you've got to make the dollars and cents really have to work on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a minimal amount of ridership that you have to have, and for us, it's 7 people per hour, and that's not a lot of ridership. And so, if we can't get 7 or above in pretty short order, it's not sustainable, and that's what we have experienced anytime we've tried a new fixed route. So we're looking at some more modern options for service.
Hey, is it I would assume that this is definitely the case, but I don't know. When you think about this being a coast community and having Highway 90 and Pass Road and so on, does that make it easier or more complicated?
Well, you need density for fixed route to work, and of course we have commercial density on Pass Road, residential and commercial. It's pretty dense, so that makes it a viable route. That's one of our better routes. And then Highway 90 is not a lot of residential density, and really, if you look at it, there's some commercial density in pockets. And so, but yeah, those are 2 good operating environments. Those are 2 of our better routes. And, talking about the Highway 90 route when Katrina hit, that was built out, and that killed our best route overnight.
We're going to talk more about Katrina here in just a second, but we're going to talk about ADA and special services that they also provide. And we'll talk a bit about funding. Then we'll talk about Katrina specifically when we come back with our conversation with Kevin Coggin of Coast Transit Authority. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Kevin Coggin from the Coast Transit Authority. And we're going to get to a little bit of what he learned about himself and this community after Hurricane Katrina. But before we do that, I want to zero in a little bit. We just talked about some fixed routes and how they approach that. But there's an ADA and paratransit service aspect to what you guys do, Kevin. And then there's also special services that you're involved in as well. Kind of give us an overview of that.
Collectively, we just call it demand response, but it's a lot of things. We do transportation services for senior citizen programs in Harrison County, Hancock County. It allows senior citizens to maintain their independence. We take them to senior centers if they want to go there. We take them grocery shopping once a week. We take them to doctor's appointments up to 3 times a week. And so it's really helps them maintain their quality of life, their independence. There's no cost to the seniors. It's paid for with CTA's federal subsidy money, and the counties. We do have a contract with Harrison County and Hancock County, and I want to compliment both of those counties. They have wonderful programs for their seniors. We have services for people with disabilities, the same thing. It's all this is door to door, and you call and make an appointment up to 2 weeks ahead of time and the day before. And it allows people with disabilities to maintain their independence, and there's a cost for people with disabilities, but it's very, very low. It's $2 to get on the bus, and we have some zones. So the typical trip costs $4 each way, and we haven't gone up in our price in like forever. So that's a wonderful thing we do. The place where our business is really growing is access to health care. We have signed a lot of contracts over the last year or 2, and we have grown our demand response business 30% because it's access to health care. We get in mental health care, and a lot of it is mental health care, and I feel really good about that. For instance, I'm not going to name names or talk about who our clients are that we serve, but we work with some mental health care organization, and just for instance, the kind of things we do, they called us up and they had a 12-year-old person that had been in clinics, there at their place, and they were trying to get the kid home, and the mom didn't have transportation to come get them, and it was like a 3-hour trip. And they called us, and we said, sure, we'd be happy to take them home. And so that's just kind of the impact to people that really need it. And then there's, and we do a ton of dialysis too. People don't realize that. We do a ton of dialysis work, and it's hard work. we lose people. It's hard,
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard on the drivers.
I know it's got to be. I mean, again, there's so many there's such a diversified business, and the same thing goes true for where your money's coming from. So, as I pointed out, some of it's developed locally just through you doing what you're doing. Some of it's coming from cities and counties and the state and even the federal government. The reality is, the good news about that is those funds have a place to go inside your organization, and then you take it very seriously to make sure that Coast Transit Authority is meeting the needs of this community. You've got a really good board of commissioners. In fact, I had Jerry Dodge on from D'Iberville not long ago. Had a great conversation, and he spoke of his role, his role on the board, his role in working with you and the Coast Transit Authority very proudly, actually. They all feel that way, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and we're blessed here. I'm personally blessed to work with the board. They're mission oriented. They don't bring politics. They don't bring personal agendas. I love that about them. We meet. We talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it. Productivity and all those things we talk about. And their job is policy and oversight. And they let me manage the company. I work for them, and everybody here works for me. And when I need their help to do something, whatever the case may be, they jump in, they do it willingly, and they're very effective at what they do. All of them are very respected and very well connected in the community. It's just a great working relationship. I could not do the things that I do, and we could not do the things that we do without them, their vision and their participation.
Well, what you just described, and I'm not going to draw you in. I'm not even going to name the organization, but when a year ago, 2 years ago, when I was engaged in another organization that was regional in nature, where there was way too much dabbling, what I came to appreciate is that when there's not a understanding on the board about board governance, that people will wander off and get involved in micromanaging and doing things that take the power away from an executive director. And then as a result of that, when you have these kind of loosey-goosey situations, then it creates opening for political influence, and it's really difficult. And one of the things I've noticed about you over all these years is you sort of knew what your sandbox was, and you stayed progressive about it. I'll give you a good example that, all what you do requires you to be on the cutting edge. And I would say maybe one of the biggest changes, I'm sure technology probably is a big change, just in terms of helping you evaluate routes and understand routes more efficiently, but also just the technology you're deploying inside with your buses and all of that. Once again, it probably draws on your background as a mechanic in a big way, but there's been massive change in that arena, hasn't there?
There has, especially recently, the last year or two. So, after Katrina, I know we're going to talk about Katrina specifically, but in terms of technology, after Katrina, we had a substantial amount of hurricane recovery money that we dedicated to bringing in totally new technology, cutting edge at the time, the best you could get. Well, that was a long time ago, and now and here we are again, CARES Act money. Again, when we take advantage of our opportunities. And so we have a significant amount of money again. And so we're once again wholesale changing out all of our technology with cutting edge, most modern stuff. And it's unbelievable what's out there in the public transit arena with AI and the planning software you can use. You can plan routes. You don't even have to leave your office. I mean, it is just phenomenal. So we're looking at currently how can we use technology to do our job better and more efficiently, less labor intensive. And we're in the middle of that project right now, one of the many projects we have going on. We're bringing in all this new modern technology, and we're looking for a partnership with a provider, because there's so many new people coming in, you got to really watch it. These startups, you can buy some technology from a startup and they don't make it, and then you're not in a good spot. So we're considering that as well.
Yeah, I know that part really well. In my prior life, we were always on the cutting edge later in my career of a lot of digital stuff. And some of these vendors brought the goods and some didn't. And, doing your homework and the due diligence required to pick the right partner so that you can, as a team, go forward in a sort of more of a proven way than an exploratory way. But I can only imagine how technology's changed your world. One of the things that you wrote is veteran of hurricanes, pandemics, economic strife, and oil spills, and you really mean it. With each of those comes a big challenge. One of the things I think about when I think about you, Kevin, is that before Katrina hit, we knew each other. You came to editorial board meetings, but I really didn't know you well. And one of the things I wrote in a book of lessons about Hurricane Katrina was that before the storm, my observation was that we moved too fast, that we didn't get to know the essence of who people were. You just didn't take the time to do that, and I certainly was guilty of that. After Katrina, though, some people that you expected to step up didn't, and others that you would have never, maybe you didn't even know who they were. They just stepped up in ways you never would have imagined. What I came to appreciate after Katrina was that the big lesson was you got to spend more time to understand the essence of who people are. That's really one of the reasons I enjoy doing this show, is it gives me a chance to dig deeper. But one of the people I enjoyed getting to know better was you, because you were so committed. You were working so hard through the Governor's Commission and otherwise to try to figure out how to rebuild, not just rebuild Coast Transit Authority, but to understand what this new world was going to look like and how you were going to operate inside that new world. You already mentioned a minute ago that you spent that time, the post-Katrina world, as a way of sort of stepping up the game of Coast Transit Authority. So why don't we do this? We're at the end of this segment. When we get on the other side, I just want to kind of get your observation about all of that and what you learned personally and professionally, and how it made you a stronger leader today. It certainly made me a better leader going through that process. When we come back on the other side with Kevin Coggin, the Executive Director for the Coast Transit Authority. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Kevin Coggin from Coast Transit Authority, and when we went to break, I was telling him that after Katrina, the Katrina experience either broke you or it made you a better leader. And in some cases, it broke you and then made you a better leader. But what were your observations about what I had to say, Kevin?
Yeah, it was definitely a life changer for all of us in many, many ways. And I reflect on it, and some people, their response was, "I'm getting out of here. The place is devastated, and I don't want to be part of this mess." And of course, I'm a lifelong resident, so I'm in it for the long haul. And one thing it did, it really set the stage for CTA to be elevated in the community, and people to see the value of CTA and what we can do and how important we are. And specifically, we pre-Katrina, we were not part of the Harrison County Emergency Management Agency. And then when Katrina hit and destroyed the community and nobody had a car or a house, then the Emergency Management Agency is like, where's that Coggin guy at? We need him. We need CTA. And our facility went underwater. All our buses went underwater, but we patched them up and we, incrementally. And so it created this more cohesive working relationship, not only at the Emergency Management Agency, but all of us in the community coalesced and came together, as you know, and rebuilt this community together. And I'm afraid that time has gone by and we've all drifted into our little worlds, myself too. We don't work together. Not that we don't work together, but we're not as connected, coordinating projects as much as we should. The aquarium is an exception to that. We were in the ground floor, the planning of the aquarium. Part of the reason why it's where it's at because of the CTA Transit Center, but that's an example of how we work to support economic development in the economy. And the many things we do other than just carry people on a bus.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, actually, what's interesting, one of the reasons I wanted to do this show was not just to have these deeper conversations, which I completely enjoy, and it's given me a lot of pleasure in my retirement. But it's to try to talk more about the lessons of Katrina and what we learned after Katrina, and that the thing that to be ground zero for the worst natural disaster in American history, it delivered a blow to this community for sure. Some people were able to get through it, some were not. But the reality was, from that, if we're smart about it, we learn a lesson in resilience that sets us aside from other communities like ours across the United States. And as a result, our ability to bounce back in the future, I think still because there's people like you in positions and others across the coast, we are so much better off today for the next one than we would have been otherwise, because we built resiliency not only in the leadership but in our systems and our infrastructure and all these things that we did after the storm. But I talk about it a lot because I think it's important for people, especially young people that are coming along, and maybe people who were not as engaged in the community then and didn't really have a role to play, but as they got a little bit further in their career, they started to understand, wow, something important happened here. We learned a lot that gave us a competitive advantage if we're willing to grab it and not lose it, because if you don't use it, you will lose it. Everybody knows that. And being in silos is a very human thing. It's a very normal thing. It's just people find their comfort level, and that's just the way it is. But the thing that's going to separate coastal Mississippi from other communities, though, is we recognize that each of the communities that make up coastal Mississippi is what makes us a special place. It's that diversity in all those communities. But as an entity, as a coastal Mississippi entity, the three coast counties, we're an economic engine that drives this state, and we can't lose sight of that. The ability to sort of get away from the clutter the local discussions and be able to understand what our common issues are, which we were able to do so well after Hurricane Katrina. We just can't lose that, can we?
No, you're right. I was always very pleased and impressed about how we all came together and worked together. And it wasn't like that before. Of course, you got this catastrophic event that's driving things, but I just don't know that we could have done any better than we did. Frankly, the people.
I think it's an amazing story.
I work with you and other people to rebuild with the tourism industry, to rebuild those beach bus stations, and just as for instance, we decided we wanted world class, and that's what we delivered.
Yeah,
and that wouldn't have happened without all of us working together. It's not about me; it's about us.
Yeah, it was a team effort, and in Haley's book, America's Great Storm, that I had the opportunity to write the foreword to, and it captures so much of what you and I are talking about. And long after we're dead and gone, people will be able to pick this book up and say, okay, what is it that made that so special? And they can be reminded, and hopefully we've captured a lot of those lessons that make this place so unique. But again, one of the bright spots for me, there were so many bright spots of being in the trenches with leaders that were willing to burn the midnight oil and do what it took. And one of those was you. I learned a deep respect for the role that you play in the community, and it forever changed my tenure as the publisher of the Sun Herald and beyond, how I viewed Coast Transit Authority. And you actually cite that as one of the reasons, one of the benefits of the storm, that it did change people's perspective, and you became a strategic partner for this community and the newspaper and in so many and in so many other ways. You just have to you have to keep the foot on the gas to make sure we don't lose that.
Everybody does not respond well to crisis, and crisis management it's a mental thing, and
yeah.
I'm just one of those people that can do that, one of many people that can do that. I don't buckle in crisis management, and that's hard to do. It's just hanging in there, and not that it didn't beat me down, because it did, but I just kept getting back up. And what are you going to do? You're either going to do what needs to be done and put the pieces back together, or you're going to pack up and leave.
That's where I was, man. That's exactly where I was. But listen, we're out of time. Kevin, it has been a pleasure to catch up with you. Keep up the good work, my friend. Send my regards to your board of commissioners, and we'll come back. Let me know if something good happening at CTA, and we'll get you back on, my friend.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's been my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. This has been Kevin Coggin from Coast Transit Authority. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.